Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy Podcast Studio. And our topic today is going to be vitality. And vitality, what is vitality? Vital comes from the root, is a Latin word meaning life. So having vitality means living, essentially, in simple terms. And what does that mean? That means health. That means freedom. That means financial. Um, it doesn't mean being sick all the time. And since we talk about healthcare on our podcast, that's kind of what we want to focus on today. But there's many things that affect our health that you might not think are healthcare related. Janet?
Right. Well, let's just since we are talking about vitality, really, we kind of have a theme that we talk about quite often is that we want to thrive and not just exist. So thriving could mean, financially, it could be relationship, it could be your health. All those things kind of come together. We know that in the last 70 years, our country's kind of taken a shift from different aspects, whether it be our relationships with our neighbors or our friends, or whether it's our community or our health. And a lot of that ties into whether we live a very healthy and happy life. And our existence is just mundane or just getting by. I mean, Shawn and I have friends that, for example, have career paths and they're putting in their time. They're just putting in their time. And I find that rather odd because even as Shawn and I have traveled, there's many places that we went to that may not have the same amount of financial resources that we do in America, but these people are very happy and thriving and existing. And so we just kind of want to talk about that a little bit. Of course, in health, we're always talking about our body, but emotionally, mentally, and connection with other people are super important as well as financial.
And let's just start with the simple stuff because we talk about that often on our podcast. Um, Jan and I are two pharmacists that don't believe in drugs to treat most long-term disease. Being on a pharmaceutical long-term for your health is not empowering at
No.
all. It's disempowering. And that's one thing that Jan and I wanted to do with this podcast is educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. So being off pharmaceuticals is part of that. And you know, we might have been taught that pharmaceuticals will help us stay healthy. Like, for instance, oh, you have high cholesterol. Let's give you this drug to lower your cholesterol to prevent cardiovascular disease. Well, that's just not how it works. It's not that simple. Janet and I have talked often about statins. That's one class of drugs we would never ever recommend. We would never ever take ourselves. We don't believe it decreases cardiovascular disease, and it definitely doesn't make you healthy. What makes you healthy is how you sleep, how you eat, and how you move. Those are the three most important things. Now, stress and the people you hang out with also go hand in hand with that. But you don't get healthy by taking a bunch of drugs. That is for sure. Janet?
No, I mean, if we look at our society, and this is even something very fascinating to me when we talk pharma and people talk about the advances we've made. Well, yes, I think acutely that is an accurate statement that we've done some great things being able to help with trauma or an acute illness like an infection or a broken leg or any of those things. However, I think on the chronic side, we've failed miserably. And especially, if we look at how long pharmaceuticals have really been in our culture, 70, 80 years perhaps. And our lifespan is actually declining in the last 70 years. So that tells me there's something wrong in this picture. And I honestly think that, we treat people like in compartments. Well, if you have high blood pressure, we give you high blood pressure medication. But what if the problem is what you're eating, how you're exercising, how you're not being a part of your community or your family or your friends? What if you feel stressed out because that stress is not coming down because you're not participating in daily functions with other people in your lives. I mean, we need to examine all these things because we're not just one little box, and we're dynamic, and there's something called community that's super important, and I think we've kind of missed that. And really in the last few years, and at least the last 3 years, that's really came to light when we're looking at depression and anxiety in our youth, or elderly feeling alienated. I mean, we have to be connected. We have to have communication with other people to be healthy.
And yeah, we aren't created to be alone. As much as you might hear that in some of our pop culture, we are created to be with others. Those are just facts, and we'll be happier when we're with others, the right people anyway. There are some people we might not want to be around. I've got them in my life. There's family members, there's friends, that I just choose not to be around, because you have to create boundaries, because sometimes those people will bring extra stresses into your life.
So, how do you live a vibrant life with vitality? Well, let's start with some of the simple things that Shawn and I have talked about. Having a great um, way of living your life, choosing to figure out how you're going to do something very consistently on your daily activities. And sleep is probably one of the most important things. We've talked about nutrition, we've talked about exercise, but Shawn and I, we were driving back from a race, and we were also talking about how, as humans, we're not meant to be alienated from one another. And we're kind of touching on this a little bit, but there's stats out there talking about couples that hug each other, people that be involved in each other's lives, usually have a longer life. They laugh more, they have more interaction with other people, and it means a lot because there's part of us that needs to kind of have that balance. I mean, we can do all the other things, sleep, eat, exercise, but if we don't have good connections with other people, there's a stress level that, doesn't quite come into balance with the world we live in.
What was that stat you were sharing with me? A 20-second kiss a day increases
No,
your, what was that?
6 second kiss, 20-minute hug, and couples that cuddle actually live 4 years longer than couples that don't interact in that way. So it could mean you kiss your spouse 6 seconds before they, 4 6 seconds before they leave the house, and give them a hug for 20 seconds. And then if you cuddle, then they say that those people have less arguments, or are happier and more content in their life over time. And that's coming from people that work in mental health and emotional health.
Well, should we really be surprised how important touch is? I
No,
mean, to other human beings.
no, because if you think about it, there's a thing called failure to thrive. We see that with infants if they don't bond with their mother, and you can see that with animals if they don't bond with somebody or some other animal, then they fail to thrive. I mean, that's instinctive. That's what we need as a mammal for existence. And so we need those connections, I think, to have a vital life. What good is it if you have a big bank account if you don't have good interactions with other people around you, or you don't have your health?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, think about Steve Jobs. What Steve Jobs says. Steve Jobs died. One of the wealthiest man in the world, the founder of Apple. Um, I think he died in his 50s, I believe, from pancreatic cancer. And he did not die a happy person. And he was kind of an isolationist, and kind of an introvert. Imagine that being, what his uh, career was. But he was an extrovert in some ways because he's a great marketing genius. But he talked about how unhappy he was. Doesn't matter what kind of money. I don't remember the exact quote. You can look it up, but doesn't matter what kind of money you have, but if you don't have your health, you have nothing. That's one of the reasons Janet and I preach what we preach, because um, your health is the most important thing you have, and your health is the most important thing that you have to create your wealth. Those are just facts. You can work harder if you are healthier.
Right. And, to touch on this, if you're in a career path that doesn't set you well. I mean, why? Especially in the United States, we have a free country, or so we feel like we have a free country, right? Well, freedom starts with your own brain. So you have to empower yourself. You have to give yourself liberty to make those decisions. And if you're in a job that isn't fitting you and you're not happy, putting in the time to me is really sad. I think there's better ways to do it. There's times where Shawn and I, even in our career, where we thought, we swallowed this red pill, a pill for every ill. And then we started realizing our patients were getting sicker. So they weren't improving and we wanted to help heal. So sometimes you have to rethink what you're doing and put it in a different light. And in fact, this is something very fun that Shawn and I we're listening to from Steve Forbes. Yes, Steve Forbes. And one of the things he talked about the United States is that many times people that have been very successful in our economy were people that just came up with the solution for a problem within the job they already had, or they just looked at like maybe it's a new hair product for African American women, or maybe it was coming up with Barbie because Barbie doll was an adult doll for young children, and it was a success. And I think that started what in the 60s or 50s. I mean, who doesn't know about Barbie, right? So sometimes it's just our creativity of not just being okay and being stuck in a position that doesn't feel fulfilling in our job or in our outlook of what we are going to do for the rest of our career.
I think part of the problem is when it comes to that is that people, they'll pick a career like Janet and I did, being pharmacists, and they realize after a couple of years, like Janet and I did, that pharmacy is not what it's cracked up to be. Basically, most pharmacists are copay collectors and dispensers of poison for big pharma, and we realized that, and we made changes. I still have colleagues that 30 years later are hating their job. They can't wait till they can retire, and I just can't believe they're going to do that for 40 years of their life. It's like, even if you picked a career path where you went to college and you spent time and resources on this career, don't suffer in that career for the next 40 years. I mean, do something different. Do something different so you can thrive. But we're meant to be that way. We're meant to be productive. We're meant to love what we do. Work should be a blessing. It should not be a curse. And if you stress about it every day and you dread going to it every day, then you should probably pick something different.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. One of the things that I was very fortunate to have was a father that always told us, I had five other siblings, there were six of us, and he said, find your passion in life. It doesn't mean that you have to have, billions in the bank or millions in the bank, but if you find a purpose where you like to do even the mundane things that come along with that job just don't seem as bad because you found a purpose, something that gave you a direction. And that could apply to also, a purpose in your relationships, a purpose in your exercise. One of the things that Shawn tries to do is he sets up races so he has a purpose, his goals. He has, I'm going to be prepared before I go into this race. So I have a skill set ready to go. So it keeps you active in your brain and keeps you moving and looking for something to keep you occupied. And a purpose is very important, I think. When we just put up with, oh, I'm just getting by, I think that really hampers your existence and vitality because people that are very, like people that you see that live to their 90s and hundreds usually are people that are super happy, have something to do that is important to them every day.
And many times those people are still working, and realize what you call work. If you love what you do and you feel that you have a purpose and a passion for what you do, you will never work another day in your life. Janet has an amazing story of a 92-year-old uncle. Go ahead and tell that story.
Yeah, so my uncle David was a rancher, and his son and his grand boys, and probably neighbors too, because this is usually what ranchers do, is that when they, are working their cattle, they work together. And my uncle David was working cattle, meaning riding his horse, roping, branding, vaccinating, all that work. Um, and he was to that day that he was doing this, he was very active, 92 years old, very physical, very healthy. very vital in his life. And the next day he woke up and told his son that he needed to go in because he wasn't feeling very well. And they live in rural North Dakota on a ranch. And so by the time his son got him in to see a physician at the hospital, they couldn't fix his punctured lung. But the good news about this is my uncle died with his boots on, and that's kind of a saying that ranchers have, but he was still very active up until the very day he died, physically active and physically strong. His brain was very, very vital, and he was enjoying life and knew had his faculties up to the day he died. And honestly, I feel like that was a huge blessing to his kids and his grandkids because they saw this man who worked hard all his life, enjoying what he did, and he didn't go out suffering and dying inch by inch. It was a huge blessing. And I think of also Shawn and I've talked about Maggie, a rancher that's what, 82, 83.
82.
And we saw a little bit about her story through Healing Humanity. And this lady can outwork most people, outwork most
Doesn't
people.
matter the age.
She's a rancher, and she has been active throughout her whole entire life. And she really talks about it. It's spiritual, it's mental, it's physical, it's emotional, but you got to put the work in and find what really makes you thrive. And I think that those examples in my life are just blessings because that's how I want to be. Like that's being vital, right? Like you feel really important because whatever you're doing is really motivating you to give you a purpose.
And she has she's been a carnivore for 65 years. Imagine that. She raises cattle and she's a carnivore. Been a carnivore for 65 years. The woman will carry 2 buckets of grain in each hand. They're 25 pounds each. So 50 pounds in each hand, and she'll carry that for a quarter of a mile, multiple times a day. She can climb fences.
Ride horse,
ride a horse,
work cattle.
It's great.
Yeah, if you've been on a ranch, working cattle is very physical, very physical.
And so when if you go to a doctor and they just say these problems are related to your age, get a new doctor. It's probably related to your diet and your activity or lack thereof of activity. Because like Janet's example of her uncle that was 92, was he in the same health that he was when he was 20? No, absolutely not. But he was still doing everything that he wasn't sitting in a hospital bed, he wasn't sitting in his chair, he wasn't using a walker, wasn't using a wheelchair. And the reason why is because he got up every morning and did the same thing. He ate the same way, he moved the same way. He didn't stop doing that. One of the reasons that our health declines as we get older is because we stop performing.
Right.
And what does that mean? That means we stop getting on a horse, we stop riding a horse, we stop carrying things, challenging ourselves. And it's important to challenge ourselves the rest of our lives. I mean, there's things that I do. I raced a course over the weekend, a downhill mountain bike race, and it scares me every time. And I don't necessarily, I like the results, but I got to get it in my head that I can do it. And it's a challenge. And if I wasn't doing those kind of things, I'd probably sit on the couch eating Cheetos and drink beer and get fat and die early of a heart attack.
So we have a great friend, Robbie Ross. She's an RN, but she also teaches people how to be vibrant and exercise and nutrition. And she took on her mom. She since passed, but she took on her mom and helped her get off her medication. And she didn't realize, her mom didn't realize how sick she was feeling because of all the side effects and all the different things that were coming with the medication, with exercise, diet, and sleep. And it made a huge difference. And before her mother died, I don't think she was on any medications. And our whole point of this is that a lot of times we go to our doctor and maybe they think they're doing the right thing, but perhaps they're actually not, right? Like perhaps we need to say, like, for example, Dr. Scott Jensen was talking about people falling because their doctor is trying to bring their blood pressure down to a standard that we've been given by the Heart Association and standard of care with with providers and throughout the country, and perhaps those numbers aren't right. Perhaps we're being a little too aggressive, and we need to, work on getting our blood pressure down in a more natural way versus with medication, so we don't fall from the side effect of a medication. So we have a broken hip or a broken knee, or any of those things. So the reason we talk about this is because if you fix yourself with diet, exercise, and sleep, and being active with your you know people around you and your community, chances are those side effects are not going to be bad, right? Where if you put on a pharmaceutical into your life or a foreign chemical into your body, there's a trade-off, and those trade-offs might not bring you to the point that you want. So let's say my husband's taking a high blood pressure medication, and he's racing on his bike down a mountain, and he, gets a little bit dizzy. Well, that could mean I'm going to get hurt, right? So there's different things that you got to think about. And sometimes I think in medicine, we just check the box. We just say, well, this is standard of care, but is standard of care quality of care? Is it really existing and living and thriving?
Yeah, and contrary to what we've been taught in our society, medications, the traditional medications that are prescribed for pick a disease, whatever it is, um, they don't make you healthier; they make you sicker. Those are just facts. Medications are poison. Those are just facts, and that's why they have toxicities. We call them side effects to kind of, um, you know, uh, dilute it and make it sound it's not as bad, but they're toxicities. That means you're getting a poison, and that's why you're having side effects or toxicities. So, um, realize the less of those you can take, the better. And let's just talk about some disease states, Janet, that you would never recommend taking medications long term for.
Oh, I have a lot of them. But well, we talk about cardiovascular, because that's still the number one killer in our country. So hypertension is really usually caused by our diet. We need to decrease the insulin resistance that's happening in our body from all the processed foods and lack of activity. So, losing weight, eating properly, and sleeping is going to be a long term benefit. Cholesterol medications. I personally will never go on one. I think that that's been a debunked theory for quite some time. And if it was going to treat cardiovascular disease, then they've been out for over 40 years. You would think that the number statistically in our country would be going down, but we're still, what is it? One American every what
1.7 seconds die of
dies.
cardiovascular disease.
So we haven't changed that. So, that's like insanity in my brain. That's the definition of insanity. Cholesterol meds aren't working, folks. And if they were, why aren't they working? Because over 50% of the people who have a heart attack are already on a statin. So that's not working. So it's got to be diet, exercise, and lifestyle, period. Probably the other one would be maybe insulin. Um, to me, unless you're type 1, and type 1s can really bring it down by their caloric intake and eating proteins and exercising. But adding insulin is like putting kerosene on a fire. And Shawn and I met Dr. Nelson
Vasquez.
Vasquez with Healing Humanity, and he was an expert treating his patients for diabetes, and he himself was taking over 300 units of insulin, well,
A
daily.
day.
But really, what he needed to do was lose 100 pounds. So, you know, it was masking, it was, keeping the A1C down or the sugar levels down, but it wasn't curing, it wasn't healing. The way to heal your body is get rid of all the carbohydrates and eat proteins and fats. So those are probably the main three. I mean, we could go on for hours, but
Well, and on the insulin, we're just good. Let's just go even further on that. I'm going to speak for Janet here, but we wouldn't recommend any medication for type 2 diabetes,
no.
um, especially insulin. But type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle created problem, mostly by diet. Type 2 diabetes, diabetes mellitus, means you are literally, in Greek, means you are urinating out sugar. It means honey siphon in Greek. The way you stop from urinating out sugar is don't eat sugar. So don't eat carbohydrates, and you will not have type 2 diabetes. Guaranteed. I will. I don't guarantee many things in this world, but I will guarantee that. So if you go to a doctor and they just want to prescribe a bunch of meds and say type 2 diabetes is not reversible, you have a drug dealer. You don't have a healer. You need to go somewhere else.
Well, I think many times what we do is treat a number. We don't treat the human in front of us. So we forget about, okay, is this a very high stress person? Like, is their job stressful? Is it the hours they're working? Is it the diet that they are having? Is it lack of sleep? I mean, all these things they play a big role. But when you go into the system now, you're kind of locked in because you get 5 or 7 minutes in the office and they hardly ever look at you. They just check their box on the computer. Well, you know, one of the things that is big in the news today, and even when we're talking to our kids or people around us, is AI. So you think that AI is not going to take your job if you're just checking the box, if you're a physician or a nurse practitioner? Because there's already stuff being put out there that pretty soon, all you do is just, fill out a form and they're going to be able to drop your medication at your house because it was filtered through AI. I mean, how's that healing? I mean, it's scary to think, but I mean, that's really no different. It's a logarithm.
Yeah, algorithm. So it looks like we have a comment. Zoe, you want to go ahead and stream that? Let's see. So go ahead and stream the one from Aaron first, Zoe, so we can read it. Aaron Grover, thank you for your comment. How do you all? I just watched Living to 100, Secrets of the Blue Zones. An integral part of holistic health is both community connection and daily functional movement. Cheers. Thank you for that comment, Aaron. And yeah, that's absolutely true. One thing, I'm just going to comment on this. One thing I don't like about the Blue Zones is they talk about mostly a plant-based diet, and that is something I don't believe in. I think we're omnivores and mostly carnivores is what I believe. So thank you for that comment, Aaron. Let's see, we have another one. Go to the first one above that. Roel Bueno, will oral testosterone ever become affordable?
No.
No. Great question, Roel. But first of all, oral testosterone for men will testosterone base is not absorbed very, very well orally. And they do have an oral form that has a different, that's commercially available, that has a different salt form that's available, that's somewhat absorbed orally. But anything that is approved by the FDA and made by Big Pharma is never going to be inexpensive. That's part of the problem. There's a lot of other ways to deliver testosterone. At mostly professional pharmacy, we make a testosterone cream for men that is absorbed very, very well. We're the only pharmacy in the nation to ever prove that with a study to show the absorption of our compounded testosterone cream over time for men. Janet, what do you want to
Yeah,
comment on?
so the other problem is oral is that you have to have way too much of the product to have a therapeutic dose. So dosing is a huge problem. And affordable, and usually, I mean, big pharma is usually not affordable. They usually put something in something crazy, right? So you're going to have to end up with a compounding pharmacy or an injection or a pellet. So and why the next question he had was, why do doctors always attack red meat? Well, we've been taught that we vilified red meat 40 years ago when they started giving out, we should lower our cholesterol numbers, and it was really vilified then, I believe. And so the whole thing about colon cancer and irritable bowel and so many different things. But if you really look at humans that have survived on this earth, most populations of people that survived over the centuries had a huge meat source, and most of the time they hunted something that had red meat. So I think it's just propaganda in my brain. I think, we're trying to sell something in another place, and so we vilify it. And part of that is our government, part of it is big pharma, part of it is just people's thought processes. But people that live long, healthy lives throughout the centuries always had a very good meat source. And red, I mean, I think fish is good too. I think poultry, bird, or whatever is great too. But I think we just I mean, we put it out there, so therefore it might be true, right? And I bought into it too. So
Yeah. I mean, humans have thrived on red meat for thousands of years, and yet now doctors are going to say it's bad. Um, I mean, that's just ignorance. I mean, those doctors are ignorant. Those are just facts. Looks like we have another comment from Aaron. Have you all heard of methylene blue? And what's your
yeah,
opinion? Yeah, we've heard of methylene blue, and we're going to default to what we always default to, Aaron. Um, methylene blue has been touted as having some great some great effects, but here's the reality: we don't believe in any medication largely to treat chronic disease. And I get it. You could call methylene blue a supplement, not a medication. But ultimately, focus on sleep, diet, and exercise. That's how we stay healthy. Once you maximize that, which most all of us, including myself, have not maximized that. Once you maximize that, then you can worry about some of those biohacking techniques, whether it be NAD or methylene blue or whatever. Now, I will say, acutely, some of those things
sure.
might be effective. Jan and I sell supplements for a living. We're pharmacists that sell supplements, but you can't supplement your way out of a poor diet.
Or health.
Yeah,
I mean, unless you're really missing a trace or you're missing something, that can be, for example, sometimes Sean and I have talked about people that don't methylate very well. That could be very beneficial in a circumstance. Vitamin D is one
yeah,
that I'll throw out there. Vitamin D can really change the trajectory of how somebody's health is going. But overall, I think you have to do it with lifestyle. These other things are tools. Even from the standpoint of you're supplementing to help a lack of maybe a trace metal or maybe omega 3s or whatever, but the core things you have to do because you can't exercise, you're out of a poor diet, you can't eat yourself out of sleeping wrong. I mean, there's so many different things, it just doesn't work. You have to have all the pieces of the puzzle.
that's correct. Well, thank you guys for those comments, and thank everybody for tuning in today. We really appreciate you all. Please reach out to us. We stream live on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, X, Rumble. Sometimes, depending on where we're at, we'll stream live on Instagram. But our firewall right now at our house and the pharmacy where we stream is blocking us on Instagram for some reason, or at least the streaming software is. So we're working on that though. So, but speaking of Instagram, please go follow us on Instagram. We have a lot of reels on there. They're short reels, and basically, we went viral a few months ago on as a pharmacist, what drugs would I recommend not taking? And we've got over 5 million views between two videos. So go follow us on Instagram, Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. We appreciate you guys. Tune in Thursday to our midweek scheduled podcast, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Thank you.